Hey Youth Pastor, welcome to my giant Ronald's Big volunteer strategy video playlist. Okay, so I actually found out that I really love volunteers and I want you to love getting volunteers as well. And so there are 4 videos in this big old playlist that we're going to talk about so that you as Youth Pastor can get, train, and keep the volunteers that you need in order to make your ministry run well. We're going to talk about why we need volunteers. We're going to talk about how to get volunteers, talk about how to train your volunteers, and how to keep your volunteers. And oh my goodness, I can't wait for you to enjoy this whole playlist that we're going to put together for you so that you can know and understand the best possible way to help people be a part of the ministry, and so that you don't have to do it all by yourself, because I don't want that for you. So welcome to Ronald's Big Volunteer Strategy. Let's go. If you've been hanging around the channel for a little bit, first off, thank you. I'm trying out some new long-form content, which is what you are getting to experience today. You'll know that I've been polling youth pastors on Facebook groups, specifically 4 of them. I'll link them all down below so that you can see them and interact with them as well. And I've been asking youth pastors, what is the most frustrating thing right now for you in youth ministry? And really 4 things rose to the top: parental involvement, lack of attendance, fundraiser, and what we're going to talk about today, volunteers. Now, volunteers was coming into a couple different things that they were struggling in order to get. We saw a lack of volunteers, so like unable to have volunteers just because there aren't any around, like they can't get them. We saw the commitment issue of volunteers, meaning that maybe they were able to get volunteers, but they didn't stick around for a long time. And usually the youth pastor would qualify what they meant for a long time. Hey, I recruited this volunteer, they only stayed around for 3 months. I recruited this volunteer, they flaked out after 1 month or 1 year. You know, different volunteer or different youth pastors had different ideas of what longevity of volunteers meant. And then there was this other thing that I thought was interesting that came up a lot in this conversation about volunteers, is just not a lack of maturity. Like volunteers not really rising to the occasion and not being the mature person in the room. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you through what I have done as a youth pastor to get volunteers, to train volunteers, and keep volunteers. All right, so we're going to do that in 3 different ways. So remember, today we're going to talk about getting volunteers, training volunteers, and keeping volunteers. And if you do something along this line, something along these 3 things right here, you will, as a youth pastor, have less on your plate because you have other people doing the ministry. I feel like I've read a verse on that somewhere about equipping the saints to do the work of the ministry. Yeah, I definitely read that somewhere. And that's a thing that we should all strive to in ministry, is not doing it all ourselves. And the first thing I want to talk about is why you need volunteers in the first place. So let's get talking about why you need volunteers. And to do that, I'm going to need to erase my board. All right, so we're going to talk about why you need volunteers. And I just heard this the other day, and I feel like it's really true, not just in youth ministry, but in all aspects of life. And this is an important lesson that we need to learn when it comes to why we need volunteers. Your vibe attracts your tribe. This is a big deal. As a youth pastor, you are one person, and God made you to be exactly the way that you are in your personality, and your likes, your dislikes, your interests, the things you don't enjoy doing. God made you like that, and that's a wonderful thing. The reality is, though, who you are as a person will attract a certain type of people, person, group, however you want to say. Your vibe, who you are, will attract your tribe, the people who are like you, or the people who are close to people like you. So imagine it like this. If you are a concentric circle, or if you are a circle down here, the people who you'll be able to attract will be people who exist here in this circle because they are like you, and they will come towards you because they like who you are, what you talk about, how you interact with them, what type of things you can relate to and talk about. And this happens with student ministry. We attract certain types of students. Now understand, your church may already have a student ministry, and just those are the students, right? Those are the students that you have. But if you were wanting to reach out to, say, students who existed outside of this circle, you would need other people in the youth ministry who were actually over here, and they could react and attract students like them. And so if you think about it, the more people that you have in your ministry, the more types of students you'll be able to attract to your ministry, because you have other people who are not like you. And we talked about this a little bit in my first video. Just the plain fact that I'm a dude. I'm going to have certain types of relationships with other guys in the ministry and certain type of relationship with other girls in the ministry. And I'm not going to be able to relate as well to the girls in the ministry simply because I'm male. Like, just because of who I am. So it would be good for me, a male youth pastor, to find some female volunteers to be around. But even still, as a guy, like, I enjoy sports, but I really don't watch them a lot, right? So I need some other dudes in my ministry who enjoy sports and might be willing to talk with and hang with other guys who enjoy sports. My vibe attracts a certain tribe to me, certain people and students to me. So therefore, I want to have other volunteers in my ministry who are different than I am, because that way the ministry that I'm in charge of, the ministry that I'm leading, can attract different kinds of students, and most importantly, help those students feel like they belong in the ministry. Even just, again, looking at who I am a white guy in my late 30s who lives in suburbia, okay? Like, that's just who I am. I was born in the South. If I have on my volunteer team a black guy who is in his young 20s, who's maybe from a more urban setting, he and I, just by the value of having a different vibe, being different people, individuals with different stories and circumstances, will be able to attract and help other students feel at home who also have different vibes and different opportunities. We'll talk more about this in a little bit when we talk about recruiting volunteers and recruiting volunteers who aren't like you. But for right now, remember, why do you need volunteers? Because your vibe attracts your tribe. Who you are is going to attract a certain type of student. So you want other volunteers who can also attract other types of students. Another reason you need volunteers is you can't do it all. You probably feel like you're being asked to do it all. Your senior pastor, your direct report, whoever it is who you talk to, probably expects you to do it all. And honestly, that's just an unhealthy expectation of you as the youth minister. You can't do it all. Even just imagine this moment for me for a second. You are up front teaching a Bible study. And let's say it's a small youth group, there are 10 of you there, and you are one person teaching a Bible study. If a parent comes into Bible study with an emergency, hey, there's a kid out here who has broken their leg. You, as the youth pastor, you have to then make this choice. Oh no, someone out there has broken their leg. I have to leave this group of 10 students to go deal with this emergency. If that is a legit problem emergency, what am I supposed to do? I'm going to leave these 10 students unattended, not knowing what else is going on, and then I can handle and take care of this one student out here who's having a crisis, but then who's taking care of these 10 students over here? And that's an extreme example, but even just say you're playing a game and you run out of supplies. You're playing head, shoulders, knees, cup, and you need more cups. Well, if you're just in the youth room and you don't see cups eventually, you have to think on the fly and come up with something. And typically, opportunities to think on the fly and come up with something don't usually end up with great things happening. You can't do it all. You can't be at every game. You can't be at every school. You can't hang out with every parent and student. You need other people on your team, on your volunteer ministry team, in order to do more, because you can only be so effective. I've heard the stat over and over and over again that as individuals, we can only have a connective relationship with anywhere from 10 to 15 people. Period. So think about this. If you've got your spouse and then a couple kids, and then let's say a friend or two, you can have a good relationship with 10 other people at max, including your family. And this is not even including like, your brothers and sisters and other people who you interact with. Your youth group, you can only socially connect with maybe 10 of them, maybe even, let's say, 7 of them at a time in a meaningful way. This statistic right here should make you go, okay, I have 20 kids in my youth ministry. I need volunteers because I, as a youth pastor, can only socially really deeply connect with 10 to 7 of these students. Therefore, I need other people in my sphere, other people who can also connect with students so that we can have meaningful conversations and connections with people just beyond the 10 to 15 that we can actually have. And then the last thing that really does matter, and I already said this before, but we are called as pastors to equip the saints. Like, that is a biblical calling that we are told to do, to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. And if we aren't giving other people inside of our church the opportunity to serve, we're being disobedient. And so we don't want to do that. Instead, we want to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. Now, sometimes you're probably thinking of people in your church and going, Ronald, I just don't know if I have a cool youth ministry church. Like, my church isn't filled with young singles who are excited about student ministry, or even young marrieds with no kids who can commit tons of time to the youth ministry and to me and have a whole bunch of energy and can really dig deep with these kids. Actually, I want to help you understand that that's a good thing. I'm going to show you why. So the first step that we're going to look at, hopefully this makes you think of reasons why you need volunteers and makes you go, okay, yeah, I probably should have volunteers. I can't do it all. I need to equip the saints, and I'm only one type of person. Hey, thanks so much for watching. So the next video is going to be me talking about how to get volunteers, and I hope you'll join me next time for that.